Welcome to this presentation titled Ethical Consideration in Data Management. So for this presentation, we shall go through the following outline, starting from the objective and introduction to ethics in data management through ethical data collection and informed consent, and we'll end with some lessons from fictional cases and best practices to adopt. So the objective of this presentation is to provide a comprehensive understanding of ethical principles, legal requirements, and best practices governing data management in clinical health research, and with an emphasis on participant protection and scientific integrity. Specifically, at the end of this presentation, we're expected to understand the basic principle in data management, identify ethical risks in handling research data, apply good practices in data collection, storage, and sharing, and learn from past ethical failure in clinical research. Ethical data management ensure data are collected, stored, used, and shared in a way that respect participants, prevent harm, protect privacy, and more importantly, maintain scientific integrity. Why is it important? It's important because participants trust researchers by giving them sensitive information, and poor data practices can cause harm, stigma, or legal consequences later on. And it's also important because it's a requirement by ethics committee, funders, and journals for publication. What are the core ethical principles behind the data? All ethical data management are based on the following principle. The first one is respect for person autonomy, dignity, and informed consent. Second one is beneficence. That means we should do our best to maximize the benefit to the participant. The third one is the non-maleficence. That means we should try our best not to do any harm to our participant. Third one is justice. That is fairness in participation and data use. And the last one is accountability, meaning the researchers are responsible for data at all times. What are the type of research data? There are several type of research data, and also the different data type carry different ethical risk. We have the first type is personal data, where we see the name, the age, the contact detail. The next one is sensitive data. We have the health status, genetics, biometrics. We have qualitative data. These are data obtained after an interview or focus group discussion. The next one is quantitative data. That is a response from survey or lab results. The next one is the digital data. These are data obtained from mobile devices, mobile apps, online surveys, or social media. And it's also important to know that the more data are sensitive, the stronger protection is required when handling them. Good ethical practice starts at data collection. That means we should apply the principle of data minimization. That means we should collect only what is necessary. We should not go and collect extra data thinking that, yeah, maybe we can use it later on. No, we should collect only what is necessary. We should obtain an informed consent prior to any data collection. We should explain to the participant why their data are being collected, how those data will be used, and who will access the data later on. We should also respect cultural and community norms. Use secure and approved tools, because at the end of the day, we should remember that the researcher is responsible for anything that will happen to those data later on. So one of the most fundamental ethical principles in research is the requirement for informed consent. Informed consent is a process by which participants are provided with all necessary information about the study and are given opportunity to voluntarily agree to participate. Informed consent is important because it respects the autonomy and dignity of the participant. By providing participants with detailed information about the study, researchers empower them to make informed decisions regarding their involvement. And it's also important to make the participant know about the risk and benefit that the study they will enjoy in the study and the benefit that that will be provided to them uh, after they have given their agreement to participate in the study. Also explain to them how long their data will be stored and if they agree with it, and whether the data will be shared or reused after the study. And also explain to them that they have the right to withdraw at any time, that they are free to withdraw their participation when they want. So it's very important. Privacy, confidentiality, and data security. What is privacy? Privacy is just the control over personal information. And confidentiality is how researchers protect that information. So key practices here remove the removal of direct identifier, the use of anonymization and pseudonymization, store ID code separately, very important, and limit access to only authorized personnel. Data security include the use of well-protected device, encrypted files, secure server or approved cloud systems, and log cabinet for paper file. Here is even advised to use the double log principle. That means that paper if sensitive information on paper file should be kept in a log room, and within the log room in the log cupboard again. So the double security to ensure the maximum protection to those data. And it's important to note that sensitive information should not be shared through platforms that are not sure, like social media, personal email, or insecure USB device. Common data threat to include cyber attacks, loss or stolen device, weak password, inadequate staff training. And it's also important to note that most breaches happen due to human errors. Now, talking about sensitive data. Sensitive data include, as we saw earlier, health status, genetics and genomic data, sexual orientation, and biometrics. And they require, when handling, a strong security, limited access, and also compliant to national and international laws. Data sharing is important because it improves the science, but it must be done in an ethical way. Ethical way means, first of all, the use of the data sharing agreement, which is a very important document. We are going to discuss that later. Obtain ethical approval or when required. Share the de-identified data only. Should not share data with people identification or information that can directly be linked to somebody or to a participant. You should follow local and international law on data protection. And most importantly, apply the FAIR principle. That means findable. FAIR principle simply means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. You're talking about data sharing agreement. The data sharing agreement is a document that outline the condition under which data may be shared between parties, with full attention to confidentiality and legal compliance. Data share agreement must adhere to relevant laws and regulations governing privacy, security, and intellectual property rights. Parties involved must establish robust measures to protect the share information from the unauthorized access or disclosure. This may involve implementing encryption technique, limiting access to authorized personnel only, or establishing strong security protocol. What are the components of data sharing agreement? Data sharing agreement should have the following component. We should be able to have on the data sharing agreement all the parties involved. That means the name of the data provider and the data recipient. We should also be able to see the purpose of the data, of the shared data. The data description, what type of data, the volume, the sensitivity of those data, access and usage right, who can use the data and for what purpose, confidentiality and privacy, data security of the data involved, intellectual property, that is the ownership of the derived data and publication is very important. Compliance with law and regulation. For example, Cameroon data protection law, ethics approval, and the duration and termination, time frame of access and condition for ending the agreement, and also the breach and liability, because responsibility, if there is unauthorized use or breach, should be well identify at the end. So should be able to attribute the responsibility to someone at the end of the day, because researchers are the one responsible of data at all time. There's no excuse at the end. So ethical analysis. Analyzing data ethically simply means no data fabrication or falsification, no selective reporting, documentation of all analysis steps, be transparent and reproducible, and be watchful for bias, especially algorithmic bias. And the data storage, retention, and deletion. The data that we take from participants, after using them, we can store them for some time. That's why at the beginning we were mentioning that we should explain to the participant how their data should be stored and for how long we retain their data. And it's important to keep only to keep the data only for the necessary time. We should not keep the data for just in case, like we can use it later. No, keep it only for the necessary time. And that time is usually defined by some institutional law and being local or international. Sometimes it vary. It can vary from 5 to 10 years depending on the context or, or on the institution. But we should keep the data only as long as necessary. We should use the institutional agreement when needed. That can be the memorandum of understanding, data sharing, a data sharing agreement or data transfer agreement. And after the time of the data retention is over, we should securely delete them or permanently anonymize the data. Now, the legal framework and regulatory compliance. So for our context here in Cameroon, there are two laws, or there are two laws when it comes to medical research involving human subject, and another one for data protection. And then this first law has some several components: the general provision, the principle, specific provision for certain vulnerable population, conservation of biological material and health-related data, the role of investigator, specific provision applicable to clinical trial, the sanction, because at the end, if uh, law have not been respected, the researcher is subjected to certain sanction, and also the transitional and final provision. So here we are not going to go through all these components, but it is just to emphasize on the fact that all in fact, the state is very watchful when it comes to personal data in research. So they have put a law that protect the participant at all costs. So the data should be collected fairly and legally. That we should all do ourselves to our best to respect the participant. Data must be clear and specific. Data must have a clear and specific purpose. That means the data that we are collecting is not just to keep and use them later for whatever purpose come in our head. When meeting the participant, we should always know why we are collecting the data that you are taking from them. Data should be collected only. We should collect only data that are necessary. Avoid to cause harm to participants. Data should not be kept forever. So we should avoid the just in case storage or the long-term retention of participant data, because later on some breach can occur and the participant is at risk. So here we are saying that all the principles that we have already mentioned above are coming all over when we are talking about when we are reviewing this uh, legal framework from Cameroon. So the second law is, as I was saying, the law related to personal data protection. And here also we see some redundance, because the redundance I don't think is made is made uh, by hazard or just I don't know. Is to keep emphasis, to keep the to put the emphasis of the importance, so that at the end of the day, if somebody failed to comply, the person should not say that he was not aware. So here also we have the legal regime governing the processing of data, the right of the data subject, prohibition and processing of personal data, the personal data protection authority, and the penalty. So here we are saying that privacy and transparency also comes. So we should tell the participant what data you want to collect, why you collect it, and how those data will be used later on. The clear purpose. Data must be collected for a specific reason. You cannot change the purpose without the permission. So if you want to change the purpose, you have to ask the permission again. And if they deny you the permission to use their data for the reason that you want, you should just comply. This to prevent misuse of people information and protect participants from any abuse. You should always collect data that's necessary. Do not collect unnecessary data. Every data item must be justified. And also know that the less data you collect, the less risk you have for any breaches or any misconduct later on. And also reduce the harm if the data happens to leak. Accuracy of the data. Data must be correct and updated. Error must be corrected because wrong data can cause harm to people, especially serious for this one is especially more serious when it comes to health data. Limited data storage. Data should not be kept forever. We are repeating it over and over again because it's really important. You should delete or anonymize data after using them because long storage increase the risk and protect participants in the long term. Informed consent. We are coming to it again. People must agree before the data is used. Consent must be free and informed, and we should avoid coercive measure or giving incentive that can uh, be found a coercive measure later on. And it's important because participation is a choice, and we should not at any point of time influence that choice. And it also, we should not forget to respect the participant autonomy. Purpose limitation. Data must be collected for a specific and legitimate purpose. Do not reuse data for new purpose without permission. Respect the original agreement with the participant. Data minimization. Only data that's necessary should be collected. Collecting unnecessary data expose people to risk. Ethical research collect only what is needed. Data security. Data must be protected from theft, loss of unauthorized access. Poor security can seriously harm people. Ethics include preventing accidents. So we should anticipate all risks that can occur with the data of the participant that we have collected and make and try our best for it not to happen. The responsibility of the researcher. Researcher and institution are responsible for data. Responsibility remain even if data is shared. That's why when talking about data sharing agreement, we need to really specify there the responsibility of everybody at any point of time because at the end of the day, there's no what we call shifting of blame. That no, it's because we share data to this collaborator. No, everything is the responsibility of the researcher. Rights of participants. People can access their data at any point of time. Correct mistakes if it happened, they notice there was a mistake with the data that have been collected. Object to some use. Data belong to the person. So the researcher do not own the data. Extra protection for sensitive data, like the health data, like HIV status, is highly sensitive and requires stronger protection. That's why we're saying the more data is sensitive, the more protection is needed for those data. And it's this one is very important when it comes to HIV research because it can cause a lot of damage, being at the personal level, social level, or even the community level. So we design a fictional case to elucidate the concept of confidentiality, and the case goes as such. Consider a case study involving a medical research project in the northwest region of Cameroon, an area known for its cultural and linguistic diversity. The project aimed to study the prevalence of a certain genetic disorder among different ethnic groups in the region. To ensure confidentiality, the research team faced the challenge of communicating efficiently with the participants who spoke different local languages and had varying level of understanding and trust in medical research. The team employed local translator and cultural mediator who were fluent and in the predominant local languages and dialect. They also conducted community engagement sessions to explain the purpose of the research, how data will be collected, and the measure in place to protect participant confidentiality. Consent forms were translated into multiple local languages, ensuring that participants fully understood their rights and confidentiality of their data. But despite all these measures, the team encountered a situation where a participant genetic data, which had implications for his extended family, was inadvertently disclosed within his community. This breach not only caused distress to the participant and his family, but also raised a concern among other participants and threatened the credibility of the research project. The incident led to a review of the handling procedures, of the data handling procedures. The research team reinforced their data security protocol and provided additional training to staff on the importance of maintaining strict confidentiality. They also held community meetings to address the incidents, reassure participants, and restore trust in the process, in the research process. So this case study highlight the complexity of ensuring confidentiality in diverse settings like Cameroon, and underscore the need for continuous vigilance, cultural sensitivity, and community engagement in medical research. So with this case, we are saying that despite all the measure that the researcher took at the beginning, when a breach occur, the responsibility always comes to them again, despite the measure that they have taken. That's why the researcher is responsible of the data at any time, all point of time. And we can find example of data misconduct all over the world. We have several examples. We can even think of at the global level, the syphilis study in the year 1930s in the United States of America, where African American men were observed for syphilis without informed consent and treatment. So this was a serious breach because the data were collected without them even knowing what was happening, and without they were not benefiting anything from the study. That was a great misconduct when it comes to data ethics. And we can also call the Henrietta Lacks in 1950s, see in United States, where cancer cells were taken and used for research without consent of the family, without consent or family knowledge. So the cells were taken and being used without participants even knowing what the data were being used for. And even when you come to Africa, we can have several examples. We can even think of HIV/AIDS research around the year 1980s to 2000, where weak data protection were applied, and this was exposing participants to stigma and discrimination. And we can also take the example of the Ebola outbreak research around the year 2015, where due to the emergency data collection that was done rapidly, the consent was not properly done, and the long-term data governance was unclear. So these are just some examples that we can base ourselves to ameliorate our future practice. So the common ethical challenge with data that we come across most of the time is the lack of informed consent, where participants are usually not fully informed about how their data or sample will be used subsequently. Privacy and confidentiality breach, where sensitive data exposed or shared without proper safeguard. Data misuse beyond original purpose, where data are being reused for research not agreed upon by the participant. Exploitation of vulnerable population. where marginalized group are targeted without a fair benefit or protection. This is also a data misconduct. And, and another one, the last but not the least, is the poor staff training, poor research staff training most of the time, because there are many breaches that occur because the staff are not properly trained. They don't actually know what they are doing, so they are doing it unknowingly. Though the responsibility, they are still to be blamed because the researcher is responsible of data at any point of time, no matter the reason. So the best practice to adopt when it comes to ethical data management, first of all, is to plan ethic early. We can use the data management plan, which is a document that explains what data will be collected, how those data will be stored and protected, who will access it, how it will be shared later on, and for how long it will be kept. Always get ethics approval before collecting any data. Protect participant identities. Keep clear documentation. We usually say what is not documented is not done. Ask questions when unsure and get trained regularly. That's the importance of continuous training. And here are some tips to ensuring confidentiality and some common error to avoid. So we will not go through all because we share the slide later on. And at the end of this presentation, we understand that ethical data management is there to protect the participant, and the researcher are accountable for data at all times. Practicing good ethics means practicing good science. We should learn from the past mistakes. So we should study the past mistakes and take the lesson we can learn from there and try to ameliorate our practice. And you doubt, whenever you are in doubt when practicing, always protect the participant. Here are the link of some reference we used, and thank you for your attention.